Welcome to the Profitable NDIS Provider podcast, where we're joined by your hosts, Tania Gomez and Paul Bryan. In each episode, we'll be sharing valuable insights and tips to help you turn your NDIS business into a profitable venture. So whether you're just starting out or looking to take your business to the next level, you've come to the right place. Let's stop surviving and start thriving.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Profitable NDIS Provider podcast. I'm Paul and I'm here with Tania.
Hey Paul, how are you going today?
Really well, thank you. Today we're going to be discussing ethical practices in a profitable business.
Yes. So we thought we should add a topic around ethical practices because the whole podcast has been called the Profitable NDIS Provider podcast. We wanted to make really clear that we're not talking about making profit at the expense of participants, that we're still running above board, highly ethical businesses.
Absolutely. So, one of the things that I definitely talk about with providers is not only being profitable, but person-centered in your care. And, we've obviously spoken a lot about compliance and making sure all those bits and pieces are in place to, when you have, the funding from the participant, managing that in the right way, looking after the participants in an ethical way, even your staff as well.
Yes. So I guess when we're talking about ethical business practices, we're talking about things like you said, we're talking about making sure we've got person-centered practice, that we're not putting profits before participants, and that we're providing a high level of care.
Yeah.
I guess the next thing that comes to mind for me is making sure that the participants are being billed the right amounts.
Yes.
So that you're using the pricing guide, you're not gouging the funding or quarantining the funding are some of the terms that I hear where providers lock participants in when they shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
Or they're charging too much, or they're not providing the services that they are charging for.
Yeah.
That's a big issue that I hear about a lot, is that a participant has lost $75,000 of money to a provider and the services weren't delivered, and they thought that they were going to somehow get away with that.
That's really unfortunate, but we are seeing those sorts of things happen. And I think a lot of it comes down to each provider being really well educated on what is required and making sure that they're doing the right thing to start with, because I don't personally believe that a lot of providers start out with the idea of I'm going to rort the system and get as much money as I can. In fact, I think one of the things that people do end up with is not being educated on how they have to manage the funds, how they have to look after participants, what's required, what the notices are, and end up in a position where they're not profitable, and they realize that they have to make some maybe sketchy decisions to just stay open, to pay the bills, to keep the tax department off their back. So we end up with people who really end up in a bad situation and making poor choices as a business owner.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, because I've never really thought about the reason why these decisions are made. I guess I kind of assume that people who are rorting the system are just bad people. But I think you're probably right. When I look at other government schemes that have been, loopholes have been used, to say it nicely, I think it really does come down to some people making a split bad decision on a bad day. I think with overclaiming specifically with NDIS, I really think it's because of the lack of education of understanding how to claim. And the lack of education available for providers around what they can and can't claim for where, and the complexity in even just the pricing guide and the support catalogue, and how complex it is to know if you're claiming for the right things for the right people at the right time.
Yeah. But, having said that, I think there also is that initial stage of just the predatorial style provider, which is just going, well, it's government money.
Yes.
I can charge for this and that's fine.
And I think there is people out there that do that. But in my experience, at least on the audit side, I've only seen, out of hundreds of audits, I've only seen one provider that was obviously and intentionally, in my perception of things, rorting the system. Only one. And I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And that was the worst audit that I've ever done. And I was asked to leave by lunchtime, and it went straight to the commission and the agency to investigate further, because it's definitely outside of my jurisdiction as an auditor, as a contract auditor. But I don't think that that's bad. And when I speak to my fellow auditors, it seems common that there might be one out of hundreds that we come across that is obviously trying to do the wrong thing and trying to shifty hide it, as opposed to the majority of people who, maybe aren't unethical, but have non-conformances. Is just a lack of understanding, a lack of awareness on how to do things the right way.
Yeah. And, I think we've all been in those Facebook groups where someone's asked a question and some really bad answers have been given. And I think that really highlights the lack of, real quality education and making sure that people know their stuff.
Yes.
Right? Because it's just so important when you're dealing really with someone's life.
Mm-hmm.
And, the government is, footing the bill for the care for these people. It's not a right of a business to make profit for profit's sake.
Yes.
In this industry. And we talk about obviously being a profitable provider, but it really has to be at the benefit of being that person-centered care, making sure that the client is getting what they need. And it doesn't mean you have to be, I say even charities make money.
Yes.
Right? So just doing whatever you can for like the littlest possible price is also not going to benefit, because it will put you in bad positions.
Yeah, and I guess that's when people are backed into corners, like you said. And I think a lot of that comes down to also poor financial oversight, poor financial literacy, and poor understanding of how to run a business from a P&L perspective. And I know that I had my first business when I was 21, and I can tell you that as a 21-year-old with no idea on so many things, that there was many times that I did not pay my mortgage, or I did not pay my car loan because I had to pay staff.
Yep.
And that's a terrible position to be in. I would not advocate that, but that was all because of my immaturity as a business owner and my lack of understanding of financial literacy and my lack of financial transparency over my business. And I feel like, especially people who are taking more money than they should, or fudging the books and getting in a lot of trouble for that, it is because they've fallen into that financial hole. And when you feel like you've got the pressure of not being able to pay your home loan or not being able to pay your staff, you're just looking for another solution that is the next worst to not, becoming bankrupt, or, trying to get through because that a payment is coming, but a payment's being delayed, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Look, do you think it's possible for an ethical provider to still be profitable, while they're, what does that look like?
Yeah, I absolutely think it is possible. And I don't just think it's possible, I think it's necessary. Yeah. I think that you can't be profitable if you're not ethical. Well, you can, but I think that the businesses that succeed in the long term are both ethical and profitable, and they go hand in hand. When I worked in childcare centres, I saw a lot of childcare centres owners who were really cared about the service they provided, but they weren't able to ever get their business to run more than a few years because they weren't able to balance that P&L, and they weren't able to run a profitable business and high quality at the same time. It was almost like you could only do one of the two: high quality service, ethical service, or profitable business. Yeah. And then we had their ABC childcare fiasco, where they came in only looking at profits, and they blew up the sector for a period of time there. And that, I see that happening in disability as well. There's this idea that you can't be a good high quality provider and care about participants if you're making a profit. And I don't believe that's true. Yeah. And I think on the flip side, you need to be ethical to be able to do this long term. If you want to come in short term and get 10 participants and take all their money for one plan, of course you could do that, right? Yeah. But that is so short-minded and short-sighted. It's obviously illegal and unethical and predatory behavior, but it's not a business model that's sustainable past 12 months' time.
Yeah.
And when I set up businesses, I want a business model that I can replicate for many years, whether it's an income stream or whether it's looking to sell that as an asset in the future. And if you're truly business-minded about it, you need to set up your business around that.
I talk to so many providers who have left like a big corporation who they've got so jaded with the idea of being in a profit-driven business, and they weren't able to provide the supports they wanted to. They weren't able to really focus on the care. It always had to be to the numbers, and so they've started their business with the idea, no, I want to focus just entirely on the participant, and I'm not in it for the money. They say these things, I'm not in it for the money, and I say, cool, how long do you want to do it for?
Yes.
Because there is absolutely the possibility and the necessity, I believe, for providers to really make a good profit in the industry, because even I actually did a workshop just last week looking at people versus profit. The people that are making a good profit and maintaining a really person-focused business can do more for more people for longer.
Yes. And the participants have this funding for a long time. So yes, a plan might be 12 months or 24 months, but to be eligible for the NDIS, you have a permanent disability.
Yeah.
And so they're going to need supports permanently. So if you do a good job and you put the participant in the center of what you do, it just makes sense for that long-term relationship with the client and them continuing to use you, because there's a lot of other providers that would want that participant that would give a better level of support if they could. So really, the demand-driven system demands that you provide what services the participant wants, how they want it. And you can bet that if you're giving sub-quality service, or you're charging more kilometers of travel than you should be, or whatever it might be, that it's not going to take them long to figure this out and choose someone else. So why would you even bother?
Yeah. Look, I think one metric that a lot of businesses don't think about is lifetime value of a client.
And the cost of acquisition too.
Yeah,
costs a lot to bring someone in.
And so if you're looking at just, doing whatever you can to get a client in, and then once they're in, cool, now I've got that client, now I'm going to focus on getting the next client, and then I'm going to focus on getting the next client, but you're not really got systems in place, things in place to make sure that not only is your service good, but it's above good, and you have things in place to make sure that if there are complaints, which you want there to be obviously as few as possible of, that you can mitigate those as much as possible, but also tend to them. Because when you look at the lifetime value of a client staying in your business for 10, 12, 20 years possibly, right? You then go, right, well, what do I have to invest in my business in order to be able to make sure that they are always getting what they want? It's the idea of the gym membership. Someone signs up, they go to the gym a few times, and they stop because there's less motivation, they're not getting what they need. Whereas gyms that actually spend time on nurturing all their members have people stay for years and years and years and see the results.
Yes.
It honestly is the same with a provider who spends time, effort, and money on nurturing their existing clients, providing value, making sure that everything is how they need it, and they're working to a system which maintains a level of continual growth.
Yes. I think also it's important to talk about that the NDIS profit is mostly made up of margins per hour. So there's, let's talk about support work. You pay your support workers the SHADS award level. You earn the pricing guide amount. You're left with what the difference is between that. And so therefore, the only way to increase profits is to increase more participants. But driving that through doing a great job and getting referrals, as opposed to paying for Google AdWords, that organic growth over time is certainly a better investment, and it all stems from serving your current participants, as you were just talking about.
Yeah. I do find it funny how many people just, they've got a couple of clients and they just start investing in Google ads and that sort of thing, and start spending a lot of money on those sort of spaces, with no, again, coming back to the idea of having a really clear client avatar, knowing who they're working with and how they help people.
Yes.
So if you could imagine, what result do I want my participants to get while working with my business? It really helps you know, right, I want to invest in this thing, right? Or this type of training for my staff, or I want to invest in a van so that I can get my participants around easy without having to get another transport, or I want to offer additional services. It really does make a difference to how you view profits in your business when they're reinvested, and when it's about what else can I add value to the people I'm working with.
Because then that profit is a tool for growth and a tool for expansion. And I'm of the firm belief that it's not about getting to an end goal in business. It's about feeling like you're progressing and you're getting better and you're improving. It's this need in humans to constantly be improving ourselves. And as a business, that's the bit I love about business, is being better than I was yesterday and being able to look back and go, wow, we started here and now we're here, and we started with these systems and now we're here. We started with this many participants and now we've got more. And that journey that you go on as a business owner is really around progress. It's progress, not perfection, right? And I think that's important as well.
What you said there reminded me of some of our listeners may have heard of a guy called Simon Sinek, fantastic speaker, really around around people and business. And one of the things he talks about is the infinite game versus the finite game. And business is not a finite game. Football is a finite game. 2 teams, set rules, outcome. One is a winner, right?
That's right. Business
is an infinite game where there is no win. You can't win in business, because when you get there, do you just stop? Is that the end of it? The idea of an infinite game is playing to always improve, and always be there, right? And I think that if people can get the idea of their business should just always be improving, should always be looking for ways to make their services better, because we see time and time again people that are doing the right thing, they are focused on that client-centered service, are seeing the growth. I think it's a fantastic place to be.
Yeah. So how does an ethical business make money in the NDIS then?
Oh yeah, that's a good one, isn't it? Look, I talk to a lot of providers who, maybe started out as independent support workers, and, they charged a rate that got them the job.
Yes.
Right, and it was well under the the price guide amounts, and I've seen people say it's the maximum. I've seen people say it's a guide. I've seen people say a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, things are really worked out to be budgeted in the NDIS. A lot of the NDIS works around budgets, right? And so the pricing guide is really there to help a business budget out how they're going to operate in these plans. And so I have, and it may be an unpopular opinion, that a provider with staff and overheads should be charging the maximum amount, because in order to maintain a level of good profit in the business so that you can reinvest it and look after your staff really well, because your staff are the ones who are looking after your participants, then you want to be able to not pay your staff $26 an hour, which I've seen, which is horrendous. But it's a matter of having that volume of participants that you are actually providing fantastic services to, and you're actually really making sure that you're meeting all of those targets along the way as well.
Because we don't want to race to the bottom, right? We don't want to push prices down and down and down, because who loses in that scenario is the support worker. And, we don't want the working poor, right? We don't want people who can't pay their bills because they're being pushed down and squeezed. And it's the support workers in that which are taking the hit, right? We want to invest in our staff, grow our staff, and we want to, if we can, pay them a little bit more than we have to keep them engaged. And I think a race to the bottom and charging the least that you can doesn't work in anyone's favor long term. I think it creates I think your point of difference as a business needs to be completely regardless of price. You need to go, right, I'm going to be the Mercedes in the market, or I'm going to be the Volvo, or I'm going to be a Commodore, a Ford. I'm really bad with cars. I don't know why I use that analogy. But you need to figure out what level are you and play there. And I think the pricing guide takes a lot of that out. I guess I'm really interested to see if we get to a point where they remove the pricing guide and it becomes a really truly demand-driven system, and what happens then. But I think while we have this pricing guide, charging the right amounts is something an ethical provider does, not just to win the work, but to maintain the integrity of the system, the ecosystem that you're operating in, and so that you can pay staff the right amount, you can train staff, you can do your admin, and there's a margin in there for compliance, so you can make sure that your systems are operating as they should be.
Look, I've even seen the opposite, right, where they are charging the full amount, but they are still paying the support workers the least amount. And that's, they go, we got, great profit in the business. But when you look at the staff turnover,
yes,
you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel as far as, people may start there, but then they realize, I could be making more money over here. And so they disengage with their clients. You're not getting good service.
And we want your support workers to be the ambassadors for your business.
Exactly.
They are the front line. They are the people that represent your service every day. And a participant will choose another service provider if they have the staff member that they have a relationship with.
Absolutely.
So you really need to foster the relationship with staff so they bring loyalty to your business so that the participants stay, because the participants' relationship first and foremost is with their support workers.
So how do you reckon that a business can really make sure that they are accountable to making sure that they have, practices in place to make sure that they're offering fantastic services, but they're charging the right amounts, they're paying the right amounts? How do you think a business stays on top of all of that?
Well, I think an internal audit, at least annually, if not quarterly, is the first place to start. I think knowing the service as well. I think for me, as I've grown businesses and, especially financial transparency, but transparency over business metrics and systems are really important. So if it was me, I would be having something like putting together a dashboard of statistics in the business. What's my cost of acquisition? What's my spend on marketing and business development, whether it be conferences or Google AdWords or networking events? I would want to know what's my occupancy rate, or how many participants do I have and how many support hours, how many workers have I got that are getting the shifts that they want to get. I like doing ENPS, or Employee Net Promoter Score, surveys. I do them monthly and then annually in my business, but doing some kind of staff engagement metric to check on the happiness of staff. And then personally, I think the thing that separates the good from the great is people who consistently and systematically ask for feedback. They ask for feedback from staff and they listen when they receive it. They create an environment where they action suggestions and improvements. It's not just for the sake of asking. And that they ask participants and they involve participants in their decision making. There is a standard in the governance, there is a quality indicator under the governance standard. It's the first quality indicator, so it's 1.1, and it says in there that participants need to be involved in the development of operational and governance procedures in a business. Lots of people don't do that. And I usually try to do that standard last when I'm auditing it, because if I give a non-conformance as the first one, it puts people off. So I usually go to the end and then I come back there. But it is something that 90% of providers don't do. They don't engage with participants in a meaningful way, in a documented, meaningful way, to capture their feedback on what do they want and are they happy? Because your staff who are out there every day and your participants have the answers for why you're not making money in your business. They know where the waste is, they know where the loss is. And if you're only talking to middle management, or you're only figuring it out yourself and you're not asking other people, you're only getting one side of the story, and you won't be able to figure out where the money is being lost or where you could make more money, where efficiencies are.
Yeah, I think I agree with me. One of the reasons we started this podcast was really to help businesses understand, what they need to be doing, how they need to be operating in a really good way to not just be profitable, but to be person focused, to make sure that you've got the things in place to make sure you're not just making a profit, but you're actually going to be around for a long time.
Yes.
And as we know, there are obviously changes coming to the NDIS at the moment. We've all seen the news articles and all that sort of thing. How much change do you think, in your opinion, is possibly coming, and is it going to get harder to be an unethical provider?
I would hope it's going to be harder to become an unethical provider. Look, I think we won't know about the changes until we've actually seen the bill that goes to Parliament, because all of these things, everything in the NDIS is written into legislation and then written into guidelines. So guidelines can be changed really quickly. So the NDIS practice standards, they change frequently, but the legislation that dictates the framework, such as being able to have unregistered providers as an example, or SDA providers and behaviour support providers having to be registered, those rules are written in legislation.
Yes.
So to change legislation isn't a small process. It needs to go through both houses of Parliament. It needs to have consultation extensively, or at least they say it needs to have extensive consultation. I don't think it's going to be easy to change the framework, especially on a beast of a scheme that operates nationally, that supports the most vulnerable people in Australia, that has so many advocates involved. I think if they're going to change the legislation, you've got a big lead time to that happening, but they can change all of the guidelines, because guidelines don't need to go through Parliament. So they can change guidelines easily. They could change the practice standards. I know Bill Shorten has a lot of rhetoric at the moment, and I think it's deserved, and I think we need to make changes. But I'm not going to hang my hat on anything till I've seen what they're actually proposing, because I feel like maybe this is just a political tool, as opposed to actually something that's worth worrying about just yet.
Yeah.
The NDIS has changed monumentally every single year, and it has to, because it's an immature scheme. We're only 10 years into it. In the other schemes that I work in, like the vocational education scheme or the school system or the childcare centre system, early childhood system, these are systems that have been in place for decades, and change still happens in them every year, right? They still improve, and they learn and improve and learn and improve, like we're talking about. And so the changes in the NDIS every year are to be expected, probably for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm actually just being approved to start my PhD. I've been working on it for a while. I just got the notification this week, and I'm actually going to spend maybe the next 10 years of my life looking at how do we make regulation easier for small and medium businesses.
Awesome.
So I'm comparing the vet sector to the RTO sector, because I feel like when an RTO goes through an audit, it doesn't impact the students, or it does impact the staff a little bit, but when a hospital goes through an audit, the patients don't know, and the nurses don't know, they don't feel it. But in an NDIS business, it is a tornado that rips their business apart. And I feel there has to be something we can learn from systems that are well established, and take the success metrics and apply them, so that there's an easier way for small businesses to comply. And I'm really passionate about this because I think it's too complex, but also we've got home care rolling in. The home care systems are supposed to go live in July, and over the next 5 or 10 years, they're looking to merge them with NDIS, so you can be audited at the same time to support people over and under 65. And that for me is going to be a fundamental difference and a fundamental change, because it's on the compliance side. And that's something that I think is going to affect providers and give them a huge opportunity to move into a demand-driven system for people over 65 and improve the lives of people over 65, because I feel like at the moment, they get lost and there's not enough support for people, and we're an aging population. So I feel like that's going to be a bigger change than the rhetoric that Bill Shorten's talking about, and I don't think anyone's talking about that. And so, I think all of this will demand ethical providers. All of this will demand that you are servicing the participant, because in a demand-driven system, they'll just get up and leave you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you see that there is, the more it becomes demand-driven, the more that even participants are educated on what's available and what's coming and what should be done. Hopefully, we're going to see businesses that don't take the advice of even their participants or their staff around how things are operating. We're going to see them start to fall off.
Yes.
Because it's just no way that you can stay in business if you are continuously dropping the ball on how you treat people, how you manage your finances, and how you be compliant in an industry that is based entirely around compliance.
And And it's not just they will start to do it, they do.
Yeah.
There's only out of all of the registered providers, there's only 50% of registered providers that have serviced a participant in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
So when you look at those stats, yes, you might have thousands of providers registering in a year, but they're not actively engaging with participants. And therefore, is their business successful? They've spent, let's call it $10,000 to get through the registration and audit process. Let's call it $5,000 to be conservative. They've invested $5,000, 2 years of their time, and they don't have any participants. How is that working? I mean, it's really clear to me that those participants haven't thought through their marketing plan. They haven't thought through how to attract clients, how to add value, how to demonstrate their capacity in the scheme.
Yeah. It's amazing when you get to that point and realize just how many people are registered and not actually operating.
Yeah, it's huge. I think that's all for today. I think we've covered ethical providers, and hopefully this gives our listeners some kind of context around how important we feel it is to be profitable and ethical together, and that for me they're the other side of the same coin.
Absolutely. I think that you can see that there is so much crossover between, as a business is really person focused, relying on the growth of their business in how they provide their services and the quality of their service, always sees an uptake in the revenue because people start to come to that business. They're drawn to the business. Word of mouth, we know, is everyone's favorite source of advertising, and that's really how you drive that so much.
Yes, yeah, I totally agree. Now, next week, we are doing an episode with Partail, and we're talking all around finding and retaining staff.
Oh, I've heard so many times that it's harder to get good staff than it is to get participants into your business.
Yes,
so
that's why we thought this was a must-do episode, because it is. I often hear people tell me that it's so hard finding a participant, and then as soon as they have their first participant, the next growth hurdle to being able to take their business from 5 participants to 10 or from 500 grand to $1 million is really around how do I find staff, and then once I have good staff, how do I hold on to them for dear life?
Yes, yeah, awesome. I'm really looking forward to that one.
Me too.
Thanks, everybody. Please like and subscribe. Follow us on Spotify, Apple, and Podbean. And obviously, we're on all the socials as well. So we'd love you to share it, because what we're putting out here, I believe, is really going to help a lot of businesses build a better NDIS for everybody.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Profitable NDIS Provider podcast with Tania Gomez and Paul Bryan. We hope you found today's episode informative and valuable. If you enjoyed the show, please don't forget to subscribe, leave us a rating, and share it with others who could benefit from our insights. Until next time, keep thriving.